Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week and the next couple weeks, we're going to be talking to the folks that helped bring Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem to the big screen this past year. This week we've got script and recording coordinator Andrew Joustra. We're talking all things Mutant Mayhem, so if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it and then come back and listen. If you want to be a patron and help support this show as we grow, check the show notes and sign up today. Now, let's get to my chat with Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's My Head Podcast. I'm your host, Julian. Today, I'm joined by Andrew. Andrew, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here, man. Like we were talking just a little bit ago, folks. It's been a long time coming. It's probably since they announced the Turtle movie coming out. You were like one of the first people I hit up, and I'm like, man, I want to talk to you. And you're like, we got to wait. And I'm like, cool, we can wait, no problem. It was a long time coming. I'm happy we're doing this. I got to say, I was saving the story for when we hit record. When I told you about that first movie I ever saw for the Ninja Turtles, that first live action directed by Steve Barron, that is, in my opinion, a perfect, flawless movie. You guys are the first iteration of anything Turtles, TV shows, comic books, movies, what have you, to come close to knocking that one off of its peak, off of its shelf, if you will. Phenomenal movie, man.
Thank you.
Where
so
do you
much.
want to? Oh no, thank you. You guys crushed.
It's high praise.
Right
So, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad. Yeah, the response has been overwhelmingly positive so far, which is really nice after 2.5 years of working on something, just to finally have it out in the world and having people mostly like it. So.
Well, if they don't mostly like it, man, I think they might be a little screw loose, up there in the head, if you know what I mean. But like I said, I had so much fun with this movie. I'll even give you a story. I haven't told too many people this story. So when we went to see this movie, I took my oldest son. He's 13. We took my wife's cousin's kid, because him and my oldest son are really good friends. And then we took my 2-year-old. Now, my 2-year-old can give you every turtle, every villain, every character that possibly popped up in this trailer. And I love this movie so much. There's two things that I just don't do. I don't do spiders, and I don't do puke. It was so hot in this movie theater in the middle of Florida, right? I think you know where I'm going with this one.
Yep,
it was so hot in this movie theater that my youngest son had eaten popcorn and some watered down fruit punch and puked all over me, right? And this is 35 minutes left of the movie. And I don't do puke. I do not do well with this. And then I'm sitting there and I'm still I'm just trying to wipe it into the popcorn bucket that was empty at that point, just so I can sit here and watch. That's how good this movie was, man. I withstanded the smell of vomit from a 2-year-old's high C and popcorn to watch the rest of this movie.
To finish it, well, thank you. I'm sorry that was your first viewing experience, but it probably paired well with April towards the
it did. It was almost synced up perfectly.
It's like smell-o-vision, yeah.
Boy, oh boy. But no, man, let's take a step back. Obviously, like I said, this one was in production for a little while. COVID kind of had some bumps in the road for you guys. Definitely changed the game when it came to workflow and how you guys communicated and how you guys really pushed through this, man. But how do you go about getting onto this amazing movie? We'll start there.
Yeah. So I started on the project in January of 2021. I had, 2020, year before, during lockdown, the pandemic out here in LA, I was looking for gigs, and I'm working towards becoming a writer. So I was looking for writer's assistant and script coordinator jobs. And a friend of mine who was had just started as production manager on an animated feature at Nickelodeon reached out and said that they might be hiring a script coordinator sometime early the next year. And I was like, oh, cool. I'd love to be considered. What's the project? And she was like, oh, it's a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I'm like, cool. Try not to dork out too much, but I obviously was thrilled and had already heard about it, that it was in development. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, keep me posted. And I try to just put it out of my head entirely, thinking you never know. There's so many opportunities that come out that don't work out. And she reached back out a few months later and was like, hey, do you want to interview with me and the line producer? And then did that, and it went well enough. And a couple days later, they reached back out and like, hey, do you want a follow-up interview with our director Jeff Rowe? And so that was the first time I had met Jeff. I knew of him because I had worked at Sony Animation on a couple of movies in production a few years before that, while he was working on Mitchell's versus the Machines. So I knew of him and loved his work. And yeah, it was great. Jeff kind of pitched me this new take on what this version of the movie was going to be, and must have said something right, because I ended up getting an offer on the movie like the same week and said yes right away, and started in January. So it was yeah, I was so excited. You know, I've loved this franchise my whole life, so getting the opportunity to work on it in any capacity was exciting, but especially in a role where it's something where I could continue learning the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. So yeah, it was awesome. And the first 6 months or so that they had already been working in development a little bit for probably 6 months by the time I started doing, you know, early concept artwork of what this new version of the Turtles were going to be, you know, brainstorming the story and that kind of stuff. And my first couple weeks on the show, the first full draft of the script came in. And that was my role. I was the script and recording coordinator. So I would get a draft in of the script, distribute that to all the departments on the show. We would then have meetings with Jeff and the storyboard artists, where he would break into chunks from that script, sequences for them to go off and storyboard. Those would come back to me. I would do what's called a conform pass in the script, where if they had made any changes to the action or added some different dialogue, I would update the script to match that. And then that would go into editorial, where those storyboards would be timed out in animatic by our editors. And I would then have Jeff record like rough voices, what's called scratch audio, basically to do a rough draft of the movie. And that's kind of how we kept iterating that. You know, that's how it workflow for every animated movie, but just kept doing that over and over, film getting better and better. And then finally, I think that summer is when we cast the teenagers, the boys, to play the Turtles. And that's when we started doing actual production records where their voices were put in. And so I was responsible for setting up all those recording sessions, dealing with their managers and agents to get all of their schedules lined up. And yeah, it was crazy. And it was like that all the way till the end of the production. But it was an amazing learning experience for me, just because I'm getting to be a fly on the wall in these meetings where Jeff is workshopping it in editorial, and you know, occasionally Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are in there, and they're throwing ideas around. And it was just a masterclass in watching them work and taking the movie from, you know, this kind of rough mass into this finely chiseled thing by the end. So yeah, that's what. Does that answer your question?
Oh, it absolutely does.
Yeah,
it raises a couple I wanted
I'm sure
to talk
it does,
about, man.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely does. Jeff Rowe, man, what a phenomenal person to have helming this. The Mitchells versus the Machines, I've said it so many times on this podcast, it should have won the Oscar for Best Animated Movie that year. I think Encanto won it. And I mean, there wasn't one dull moment of Mitchells versus Machines. It was so fun from the get-go. The animation style, you'd already started to see this animation style kind of creep in. I think, you know, this is either same year or maybe the year after, you know, Spider-Verse comes out, and Spider-Verse kind of, you know, puts everything on its head, flips the game upside down essentially, and starts to change everything with the... I had one of you guys as colorist, visual designs guy, Dave Bleach.
Oh yeah,
probably. You know, I had him on a couple weeks ago. You know, we talked a little bit about Turtles because it hadn't come out yet at that point. Where he's going to come back on and do a deeper dive. But I had asked him the same question. I was like, all of these new movies that are coming out, like you see it in Puss in Boots: Last Wish, you saw it in Mitchells versus the Machines, you definitely see it in the Turtles. And he had a pretty cool descriptive of when he broke down like the art design for Turtles. And it was, I think he said it was something like, imagine if you're doing artwork in high school and it's like WWE wrestling stuff. He used something else, and for the life of me, I can't. It'll come to me after we get off the phone call or after the Zoom call. But for the life of me, I just can't remember what he said. But it was it's such a beautiful description of like the animation style for the Turtles, for this one in particular. fucking great choice, man. It was so beautiful. It was so fitting. I mean, it's so hard to articulate like what I'm trying to get through as far as the appeal to it. It's just everything about it fit. Like the voices were phenomenal. You guys crushed it on that one. The art style, and all of these different styles of animation are being folded into one movie with these last couple movies that I had just mentioned. And I called it like mixed media because you see a little bit of stop motion, you see this CGI, but you see these other things that are just like layering into the movie to make this, like I said, this masterpiece that you guys made. And going back to Jeff for just a second, when he's doing these, before I get to that one, what was that highlight getting that email back? How long were you running like, oh my God, they're going to get me. I'm going to do this. This is going to happen. How long was that going for?
Man,
did you party is what I'm getting at.
Did I party? Not a lot, because it was still very, when was it? End of October, early November. So, in LA, everything was still shut down. Like everything was so my girlfriend at the time and I were fiance now. We were just held up at home. I'm sure we had like a nice dinner or something, but didn't really get to celebrate it until much later. But I was, I didn't even finish reading the email when I was, was like, yes, of course. And I called my parents and a couple of my friends, and it was at that point that I let myself get excited and was over the moon with it. And it was nice because I had a few weeks from that time until when I started, so I was able to just kind of relax and also just do homework. I went back and watched a bunch of the old movies and the old 87 cartoon and started rereading the comics, which I did over the course of the whole show. And it was a surreal moment. Now, it's one of those things where you build up these expectations of like, oh, being part of this thing could really change my life. Like, and it has. Like, it's 2.5 years later now, and so many things that I couldn't have dreamed of doing, I've gotten a chance to do now. And I'm just so grateful I got to do it. So,
chase your dreams, ladies and gentlemen, is what Andrew's saying here, man.
Yes.
Going back to Jeff for just a second as well. When you guys were doing these, you call it scratch voices, or was it just scratch?
Yeah, okay. Scratch recording. Yep.
What was his best character and what was his worst character doing that? Do you remember?
Oh man. He did an absolutely hilarious and unhinged Cynthia Outram. He did this just absolutely crazy accent. It was so funny. It was almost funny enough to be like, could we actually get away with him I don't think he ever would have seriously considered it, but his Cynthia was both amazing and terrible depending on who you asked, but it was so funny. I'm trying to think of someone that he also like really nailed. I liked some of his take on Leonardo too, just because Leo's just this kind of straight and narrow guy, and Jeff his voice just kind of fits that pretty well. So but it was always entertaining hearing that. I have a recording of him singing the TMNT theme song very off key that I have set as my ringtone for if he calls me, which I'm sure he really appreciates. So
oh, that's pretty great, man. Now it's not just like I said, with this movie, this is like the first time, I think I mentioned earlier, but this is like the first time I've felt like a kid in a very long time. I just turned 34 a couple days ago, but like seeing this trailer, thank you, man. Seeing this trailer on my phone was nothing compared to seeing this movie or seeing the trailer in the movie theaters. I went there, and I think we actually saw it on when we went and seen Across the Spider-Verse. I think it was one of the trailers that they played then. And I thought we were going to get kicked out of the movie theater because, like I said, I take the 2-year-old, and I'm usually taking them just to kids' movies and stuff like that because you could expect kids to, talk and laugh and get up and move and shit like that. So there's no real expectations for, like, nothing that's less than chaotic when you go with the kid or you go to a kid movie, right?
Yep.
So as soon as the trailer hits, right, he's trying to stand up in his seat, and he's still way too little to like sit in the seat, so I have to put my leg on his seat so it stays and it, you know, he doesn't flip up like a V. So he's trying to stand up and he's just going, Mikey, Donnie, Rat. He's naming every single character. I'm like, shh, you're gonna get us kicked out, man. You're gonna get us kicked out. And then I'm seeing all the other kids do the same thing. And then I had this like flashback, and I'm thinking, I was like, I wonder if this is what my mom saw when she saw me doing the
Yeah.
same thing with these turtles. Like I was both an out of body experience and an in body experience, just watching him have so much joy for characters he literally just found out about 6 months ago, right? Like, because he's only 2 years old, you know, so he
Yeah.
just found out about these, and he can name every character, and just the joy was on his face. I look at that, and it made that movie that much more special to me when we went and seen it. Just seeing the
That's
joy in
awesome.
his eyes and joy as his face made me feel like, oh man, this is what it's all about. This is what I was like when I was his age, or when I was a little bit older. I still am. And
Yeah.
I think I had messaged you when we were talking like favorite scenes through the movie, when we were talking on Instagram and shit. When
Yeah.
that old boy reference / Daredevil reference hit for that fight sequence, I
Yep.
legitimately thought I was gonna get kicked out, man. I was like, let's go. I'm standing up, I'm pumped. And then you see the old boy reference, and then No Diggity drops, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'm like, oh man, they spent some money on this soundtrack. Now through I didn't want to go too in detail with you when I was on Instagram, because I want to save a lot of these for when we talked.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that scene in particular, obviously you saw every iteration of this movie from start to finish and everything in between. Was that scene a focal point at all? Did that come up later? How did that one manifest? If you
Yeah,
remember. I know it's a long time
yeah,
ago.
it evolves. I think there was, I think for quite some time there was some sort of montage where you saw them taking down criminals and getting a little bit better at being ninjas. So that was always going to happen. For it to be like that, the old boy Daredevil and a little bit of everything everywhere all at once, in terms of just like having the same shot, like, you know, composition, but changing from location to location. That didn't come in until later. The artist that boarded that, his name was John Jackson, who's super talented, and Jeff has even said, like, basically the script pages did not describe an old boy style fight. It was just kind of like, you know, here they are at Bad Bernie's place, here they are at Short Sharon's place, taking down bad guys. And so John really ran with that and came up with that idea. And then our co-director Kyler Spears and our head of story Gabe Lynn, both kind of fine-tuned it a bit. And then when it got into editorial, our editor Greg Levitan and Jeff just sat and just kept, you know, fine-tuning it so that it was perfect. And I'm pretty sure it was Jeff's idea to have No Diggity as the song, and that was pretty early when we were cutting this sequence together. And it was one that it fit so perfectly, and we loved it, and it definitely cost some money. And there were a couple times we were like, oh, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get it or not, but luckily Nickelodeon saw it as a good investment. And so I'm so glad that it worked out, because yeah, that's one of my favorite sequences in the movie. It's so fun.
What was the artist's name? You said it was John Jackson?
John Jackson was, yeah, and he on Instagram just put up his rough storyboards for that. So if you're online, follow him and check it out, because it's pretty cool.
Dude, follow him twice, man, because like I said, John Jackson, if you're watching this, chef's kiss. That scene, like I said, that scene, I was smiling from ear to ear from the get-go when this movie hit. When that scene hits, I think it's probably like, what, maybe 25-30 minutes into the movie is when that scene hits, and I'm like, dude, these guys have got, everybody involved has got my money and my undying support forever, because of, just like I said, it was just, I'm just sitting there, I'm like, oh my god, this is like the greatest thing I've ever seen. I've always wanted something like this from the Turtles, right? You know,
Yeah.
and that soundtrack has got like core memories unlocked, because not only did you have that one, you also had Vanilla Ice's Ninja Rap, Go Ninja Rap, right? And when I heard that, I'm like, no, I didn't hear that. And then I heard other parents say, was that Vanilla Ice? I'm like, well, I know I didn't. This wasn't a fever dream, essentially, is what I'm getting at. You guys hit it.
Yeah.
You know, so you could tell from start to finish that every person that laid a finger to this, that laid any kind of DNA into this movie, man, it was fan service in the best possible way. I know a lot of people don't like that term fan service. I guess it's got a derogatory meaning for some people. For me, I want fans that work on this stuff because you get to
Yeah.
see somebody's true passion and true love for this. That's what oozed out of this. No pun intended, man. It just, the love of this franchise and these characters just oozed off the screen is what I'm getting
Yeah.
at. Now, when music, and the only reason I'm asking this question is because I've never done too much of the film side. You know, I've done
Hmm.
some movies here and there,
Sure.
but my information, or my knowledge, excuse me, is a little bit limited when it comes to film. Now, on
Yeah.
the animation side, when it comes to TV series and stuff, a lot of people say that the music is like the last thing that gets done. You know, whenever you're doing a like a score for an episode, like I had the composer for Courage the Cowardly Dog on, and he's like, literally,
Yep.
you get like a week. And they're like, hey, I need this done in a week, and you'll have to do 6, 7 episodes in one go. And you guys are in the room banging your heads off the wall trying to figure something out. How
Yeah.
far into production or how close to release is music brought in? Is it a conversation from start, you know, until it's finished, or is that something that comes up post production, or how does that work?
Yeah. So a lot of times, we'll use temp tracks in editorial. So when we're building those rough draft versions that we'll do screenings of and testing and everything, and that will use basically existing scores that are out there that fit the feel of the scene, and those are just temporary. Some now that's a combination of like actual musical scores from movies and then needle drops like No Diggity. So it's a combination of those two things. The needle drops a lot of times are ones that they are looking for the one that will be the final one for the movie. So um, like in the temporary version, we had No Diggity there. We had What's Up by Four Non Blondes in there. We had the crazy He-Man remix version of that came in at one point, and so those were all things that we were fiddling with all throughout. In terms of the actual score with Trent and Atticus, they came onto the movie about a year ago, and they did some early just kind of ideas of sounds and little probably 1 or 2 minute snippets and sent them to Seth and Jeff just to be like, hey, is this the kind of feel that you guys like and that kind of stuff, and they would try that out. And then yeah, that really wasn't until probably the past 6 months that they really focused and came in when they were doing the final sound mix of the film and had them scoring everything else. So you're right, and similar to TV, it is something that does come very late in the process. And as a result of that, there are some timing things that might have to get shuffled around a little bit, just because, like, you try to have action hit in conjunction with the music. So, like, No Diggity, as soon as like the beat drops, you're having a door fly open or somebody get hit in the face, that kind of thing, and that has to be timed perfectly so that the animators know to do it exactly at that moment. You get a little more leeway with the score just because it's background and doesn't necessarily interact with the environment. But I was just talking to some folks that worked on the movie today about how blown away we were and how much it elevated those moments that had their score in it. Just because with the temp tracks, obviously were really good, but they're so good at what they do, and we're able to just elevate those moments to when you're supposed to feel sad for the turtles, you really feel sad because the music swells, and triumphant when they're defeating Superfly. And I've been listening to the score in my car. I love it. It's great.
It really is, man. Like I said, everything you can really tell, like, it's one hand washes the other when it comes to every aspect of this movie. Now, since we're talking music for just a second, you guys had one of the biggest artists of all time attached to this movie, in Ice Cube, man. And I've had a couple people on that have had him as a voice actor on some of their films, you guys being one, and then Jorge Gutierrez for the Book of Life. He was the candle maker in that one too, So I love Ice Cube, and I'm a huge, like I said, huge fan. And anytime we can hear some Ice Cube stories, I'm always down. Do you have a cool Ice Cube story, or did you get to have any kind of interaction with him while he's doing the voice acting?
I did, which I felt like anytime I was just in the same room with him, I was 10 times cooler than I actually am, just by being near him. He's awesome. He's such a nice guy. He's such a professional. Um, I yeah, him getting cast as Superfly was I can remember the day it happened. Like Jeff had a creative meeting where he and Seth and probably some of the executives had a Zoom call with him where they had to pitch him the concept of it. And I can remember, I think one of the executive assistants messaged me and they're like, Ice Cube's in. And I ran into Jeff's office playing It Was a Good Day on my phone, just cranked all the way up. But we were all very excited. And let's see, I think the first session with him was an ensemble session with the other turtles. So this is the first time we're all meeting him in person and first time he's recording for the character. So we had Micah wasn't in person that day. He was over Zoom because he wasn't feeling great and we were trying to be careful with COVID and everything. So Micah, who plays Donatello, was over Zoom at home. And then Nicholas, Shaman, and Brady were all in town, and we're all in a studio together. Seth and Evan were there. And so we recorded with the boys for probably an hour or so, just to get through some of the stuff that they had in scenes without him. And then he showed up and, everybody wasn't really sure what it's like. Oh, what's this going to be like? And Seth pitched him the character and what the first scene he was going to be doing with all the boys. And he was kind of quiet at first. And we just had no idea what was about to happen. And then he gets on the microphone and just immediately in character is like, "What bad Bernie's got turtles on the payroll." He's like, it just immediately and blows everybody away. And, he was so funny and cool. And he introduced himself to everybody that was from the crew that was there and was, very humble. But what I really loved was that he took the time to, like, between takes when we were taking breaks and stuff, he'd go hang out with the boys who are, they're all teenagers, and, ask him about what other stuff they're working on and what their aspirations were. And, Shaman, Michelangelo, was telling him that he was working on his first screenplay that he's ever written. And he was asking Ice Cube for advice because, he wrote Friday and
Oh,
he's a writer
barbershop.
as well.
Yeah.
Barbershop. Yeah. So, and just typical Cube just being so succinct, was like, act one, you get your characters. Act two, you put them into some shit. Act three, you get them out of that shit. Like, it's good. He's not wrong. But yeah, all the kids loved working with him. And, other times, when we had to record him solo, he definitely did all of his homework. Like, he always came in really prepared for his lines and he had ideas. The whole thing where he added onto, an inflection to his voice and adding the zzz noises at the end of things. That was all his idea, which was really funny. And the references, the Ice-T song lyrics, and
Oh yeah.
all that stuff was stuff that he came up with just on the fly, pun intended. But yeah, he was great.
Dude, it's so cool, and you guys got quite a few people that I've absolutely been enamored with for my entire life. I mean, when it comes to music, I've got such an eclectic, a genre or array of music that I like to listen to. Anything from, I'm a huge 90s hip hop fan. I mean, I don't think I would have been able to contain myself. The first thing I would have been like, I mean, tell me more about MWA. I want to know how much of that didn't make it into Straight Outta Compton. Tell me more about Eazy-E.
Yeah.
Tell me more about Dre. Tell me more about this guy. I want to know everything. We're supposed to be doing Turtles right now, but we can talk Turtles later. Let's talk 90s hip hop. I mean, like I said, I told this story with my Jorge Gutierrez one, but I think it's a fun one. So my oldest son Hayden, he's probably in like third, fourth grade at this time, and he had come home from school, and then they had one of those, like, they wheel in the movie things, and they're showing a movie for class, and it was Are We There Yet? One of Ice Cube's first kids movies, family movies.
Yep.
And he had said something. He was like, "Hey Dad, some of the kids were saying that Ice Cube was a rapper. Is that true?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, he's a rapper. Why would you ask?" He's like, "Well, he's an actor." I was like, "Well, I mean, people can do more than just one thing." I was like, "I cook, but I also do this and I do this and I do this. So you can do more than one thing." And he was like, "Well, can you play some of his music?" And I'm like, Yeah, I can. I know there was no better way to introduce my at that time probably 8-year-old son, 9-year-old son, somewhere around there to Ice Cube than the hardest and greatest diss track of all time. No Vaseline coming straight at NWA after he leaves him, right? And I'm taking him to
Amazing.
karate and shit. Yeah. And I'm literally and my son's one of those kids, like he loves a whole bunch of different music, but he's just like me, like he's breaking down bar by bar, like what does he mean when he says this? So he'll go and Google stuff, and he was
Yeah.
asking me all this stuff, so I'm explaining it to him, like why Ice Cube was so mad at NWA and why he was mad at all these people that he was in a group with. And then we come home a couple hours later from karate and stuff, and then my wife's like, hey, how was it, and what'd you guys talk about or whatever on the car ride? And then before I could say anything, he burst out like, Dad, let me listen to Ice Cube. And she looked at me, and I was like, yeah, I let him listen to Ice Cube. She's like, and he's like, yeah, the rapper. And I was like, yeah, the guy. I was like, the guy that was in Are We There Yet? And she's like, you mean the guy that was in NWA? I was like, I didn't think you had that much street cred. Street cred. I didn't think you'd know what that was. But yeah, I let him listen to it. It's okay, But nonetheless, man, phenomenal actor. Great choice. I loved all of the references, like you said, the Ice-T references. I loved hearing, because it took me a while. I was like, am I hearing things when he was at the end of it? I was like, am I
Yeah.
hearing that? Or I was like, oh shit, that actually happened. So great casting on that one. And the other guy I wanted to bring up, Jackie Chan. We had this talk as well as through Instagram.
Yeah.
There's no bigger or better action star when it comes to action stars than Jackie
Yep.
Chan for me. I mean, Rumble in the Bronx is probably the first action movie I remember seeing, like 4 or 5 years old. Just enamored. My stepfather had a floor to ceiling down the hallway just full of VHSs, from action movies to westerns to everything you can imagine. Steven Seagal, Chuck Norris, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Jackie Chan. He had every single VHS you could possibly imagine. Horrible person in real life. Great movie collection though, so he had some redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but he had a little bit. When I see that Jackie Chan is cast as Splinter, I
Yeah.
literally wanted to give everybody a round of applause, man, a standing ovation, take your bow, because I thought that was fitting. I look at Jackie Chan, I'm like, man, that's Splinter. Splinter is Jackie Chan. How soon or how late, I guess, in the game did you guys know you were getting Jackie? Was it kind of the same thing with Ice Cube? You had to pitch him, and then he was up for it, or was he always a name that was bounced around for Splinter?
Um, he, I think it took a little time before he was cast. I want to say I'd been on the movie at least a year or a year and a half before
Mm-hmm.
they got him, and we had tried. We basically had scratch voices for a long time, and trying to figure out this version of him, and because obviously his origin is a little bit different in this version of the movie, and um, he's kind of this neurotic, overprotective father, but you still want to believe that he could kick your ass if he wanted to. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not even sure where the first idea for him came from. I don't know if that was Seth or Jeff or someone in casting, but yeah, it was one of those things where they had to send him the creative materials and pitch it to him, and go back and forth for a little while. But once he was locked in and we had our first session with him, which we recorded him from Beijing over Zoom. So we're recording it, like, for us it was the middle of the night. It was basically like 4 or 5 a.m. um, and we only got a handful of sessions, just because getting the logistics of setting that up was difficult. So every time we recorded him, we really had to make it count and get as much as we
Mm-hmm.
could. And um, but yeah, it just sounded so great and so wholesome and funny, and everything you would want Jackie Chan to be. And it had a bigger influence on the movie as well, just in terms of, yeah, those we went back and we used to watch movies once or twice a month in like a little Turtles movie club that we did, and tried to pick movies that would be stuff that would inspire us. And um we watched not what's the one before Super Cop? Is it Police Story?
Yeah,
It's
Police Story.
we watched Police Story. We watched a bunch of Jackie Chan movies to study his fight choreography. And what's always that he does so well is using his environment when he's in a fight, whether
Yes.
it's chairs or grabbing things. And it's funny, but it's also looks really cool. And
Hmm.
so, like when you're watching his fight inside of TCRI, he's spinning around in the chair and
Hmm.
it's messy and it's dirty, but it looks like a Jackie Chan fight. And also took inspiration for that for some other scenes in the movie too, like the fight in the chop shop with the turtles where they're fighting those thugs for the first time. Stuff flying through the air, the wrenches and the sai flying around and all that. That was all a little inspired from his movies. So yeah, he had a huge impact, and uh, it was just a amazing anytime we got to record with him, just because it's like this guy he is a living legend. And
He's the goat, man.
yeah, so a perfect Splinter for sure.
Absolutely. Now, with those two, obviously there is a lot more names that we could mention and keep going on and keep going on. I think we do a disservice to the movie if we did that. However, um, Seth and John crushed it as Bebop and Rocksteady. I mean, I was very curious because I've always been a fan of Seth ever since Superbad and ever since I was getting ready to say Step Brothers, but that was like a Freudian slip. I just watched Step Brothers yesterday. But Pineapple Express.
Yeah.
That dude
Yep.
does no wrong. And then I'm starting to see him pop up more for the voice acting, like he was just Donkey Kong, my favorite
Yep.
character in the Nintendo universe. Like whenever I want to demoralize my opponents in Smash Brothers or Mario Kart, Donkey Kong's always been my guy
Donkey Kong.
since 64. Donkey
Hell yeah.
Kong's always been my guy. Yeah, I'll play with other characters when it comes to Smash Brothers or Mario Kart. I love Tanuki Mario for Mario Kart. But whenever, like, if my son starts talking shit, my oldest, and he sees me pick up Donkey Kong, he literally puts the controller. He's like, I'm not, I don't want any part of this. I'm done.
Yep.
So yeah, like I said, you guys did such a great job for the voice casting. I was really curious to see what he sounded like because you could only hear a little bit, little snippets here and there with the trailers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But getting to hear him, articulate, entire lines was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And then John Cena always crushes it. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything that I didn't like.
Yeah.
Peacemaker,
He's great. Yep.
oh, fantastic. I mean, a lot of people will say it's The Rock, but I think John Cena is probably the greatest wrestler that's ever turned into an actor. I mean, they
Yeah.
act in wrestling, you know what I mean? So they're
Yep.
already got that leg up on the competition, but this dude has crushed it. Rock, don't come at me. I love you, man. But it's just like John Cena's crushed it in everything he's touched. With somebody that is so nerdy like Seth and like Evan, man. I got to imagine that they were pulling some influences that they might have pitched you guys as well. Because you went back and said that, you still, once you got the job offer, you started reading and absorbing anything Turtles that you possibly could. What were some of the things that you were pulling from that you wanted to try to pitch and get in there, or you thought was very creative? And what were some of the things that like they were pulling from? Was it comics? Was it cartoons, movies, TV shows? What was that amalgamation of you guys coming together and making the script?
Yeah. I mean, but I obviously had very little creative influence over most of my stuff was logistical, but Jeff was very kind and great director in that he was one of those people who recognized good ideas can come from anywhere. So he
Mhm.
was always really nice about letting me pitch ideas, and occasionally stuff would make it in, which I was really grateful for. But for me, I wanted to make sure that uh, just as a big fan, that it honored Kevin and Peter, and there's little nods to both of them in the movie.
Yes.
Obviously Eastman High, and then the Laird
Laird
building
Laboratories.
that they're having on pizza on the rooftop of, and then Kevin's little voice cameo towards the end of the film. And then really they looked at everything, but they didn't want to be held to everything that's come before. They wanted to put their own mark on it. And um I think the kind of dark moody atmosphere from the 1990 live action movie kind of worked its way into our movie, just
Mhm.
because most of the movie takes place at night. um so that was a big part of it. And then I think the other big thing was the toy line from the 87 cartoon. That's really what probably had the biggest single design influence over our movie was just because those, and it was primarily the ones designed by Varner Studios for Playmates. Just because each one of those figures was so crazy looking in terms of proportions and color palette, and each one of them kind of had little jokes built into them. Like Mondo Gecko had the roller
Yeah.
skate on the end of his tail, and um, you know, uh, I'm looking around my room where I've got action figures, but each one of them was just kind of told its own little story in it. So I think they wanted to use that a lot, and kind of the not gross aspect of those old toys, but like in some way they were weird and they went against the grain, um, and I think that ties into also what you're talking about in terms of the high school, teenager being the person
Yeah.
that drew this version of it, just to make it a little more rough and have lines coming off of characters and buildings that um, ended up giving it that final look that's very cool. So